The Galactic Council was the most powerful political body in the universe, a vast assembly that united species from across the cosmos. For years, humans had watched from the sidelines, trying to earn their place among the stars. Despite their rapid progress in technology and space exploration, Earth was still considered an outsider in the eyes of many. In the grand halls of the Galactic Council, beings of all shapes, sizes, and forms gathered to discuss matters of peace, trade, and cooperation, but there was always a sense of unease when it came to humans. To the Council, humanity was unpredictable, a species with a history of violence and conflict. Their swift technological advancements were both a marvel and a cause for concern. Ambassador Lena Reyes, Earth's representative at the latest summit, had been tasked with one of the most important missions in human history, to secure Earth's future in the galaxy. The summit was meant to be the final negotiation, the moment when humanity would prove it deserved to be part of the greater galactic community. But as Reyes stood before the Council, delivering a passionate speech in defense of humanity's right to join, she could sense the tension in the air. The representatives of the various species listened with skepticism, their eyes narrowed as they weighed every word she spoke. Reyes had prepared for this moment her entire life, understanding that humanity's place in the galaxy was on the line, but she could feel something more beneath the surface, an undercurrent of distrust that would not be easily overcome. It wasn't long before the Council began to speak. The Zorathians, a race known for their cold logic and military prowess, questioned Earth's ability to maintain peace. The Thraxi, a highly intelligent insectoid species, brought up humanity's history of warfare, pointing to ancient conflicts as evidence that humans could not be trusted. Even the peaceful Arvathi, a race of energy-based beings, spoke of concerns subtle but clear that humanity's expansion into the stars could disrupt the delicate balance of the galaxy. Reyes tried to counter each point, emphasizing humanity's growth, the progress they had made since the dark days of their past, and the lessons they had learned. Yet, it seemed that no matter how well-reasoned her arguments were, the Council remained unconvinced. The real turning point came when a voice from the back of the room interrupted her. It was a voice that none of them had expected. The Orcs, a race of highly advanced and mysterious beings who had lived for eons, spoke in a tone that was almost mocking. "You speak of peace and unity, Ambassador Reyes, but your species has not yet proven that it can control its own impulses. You are not yet ready to join us." A murmur spread throughout the Council chamber. The Orcs had never shown interest in human affairs, and their sudden intervention was a shock. Reyes felt her heart pound in her chest, but she held her ground. "You misunderstand us," she said, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "Humanity has learned from its past. We are ready to stand as equals, to share in the collective knowledge and progress of the galaxy." But before she could continue, the Council voted. The result was swift, almost immediate. The decision was unanimous. The message was clear. Earth would not be allowed to join the Galactic Council. Reyes was dismissed, her mission a failure. The words that echoed through the chamber felt like a death sentence. Earth would not be a part of this galaxy. Not today, not tomorrow, and not ever. Reyes stood frozen as the Council adjourned, her mind racing. She had failed. In that moment, she realized that the battle was not over. It had only just begun. She was escorted out of the chamber in silence, her mind heavy with the weight of the decision that had just been made. She knew that this was not just a rejection of Earth's place in the galaxy, it was an affront to everything humanity had worked for. But what could she do? She was only one voice among many, and the Council's decision was final. Back on Earth, the news of the Council's decision spread like wildfire. President Claudia Navarro, who had watched the summit from afar, was not shocked by the outcome, but she was not about to let it stand. Humanity had faced challenges before, and they had always overcome them. This was no different. But the president also knew that the time for diplomacy had passed. Reyes' death, whether it came now or later, was inevitable. The message had been clear: Earth was no longer welcome in the greater galactic community. In the days that followed, President Navarro held emergency meetings with Earth's top military commanders and scientists. They had prepared for this eventuality. They knew that the Galactic Council would not give humanity a chance to prove itself. And so, Earth had developed a contingency plan, a backup that would make sure that no one in the galaxy would ever forget their mistake. It was called the Annihilation Standard, a doctrine so bold, so terrifying that no one would dare ignore it. Humanity's military forces, though still young compared to some of the galaxy's older civilizations, were not to be underestimated. The United Earth Fleet. But the real weapon, the true power that Earth had kept hidden for decades, was the Ascendant Beacon's massive, planet-destroying devices designed not just to target one world, but entire star systems. The beacons were Earth's final card, and if the Council continued to underestimate humanity, they would soon learn the full extent of its power. Rhea's death was not just a tragedy. It was a spark that would ignite a fire across the galaxy. The Annihilation Standard was not just a threat, it was a promise. Earth would not go quietly into the night. The galaxy had made its choice, and now Earth would make theirs. The decision was made. There would be no more talking. Humanity would take its place among the stars, one way or another. And the galaxy would learn to respect Earth not through diplomacy, but through the undeniable force of its will. As Earth prepared for the coming storm, the galaxy held its breath. No one knew exactly what would happen next, but one thing was certain: humanity had made its mark. And it would not be erased. The decision made by the Galactic Council had sent shockwaves through Earth. What was once a distant thought, the idea that humanity might have to fight to survive, was now a cold, hard reality. President Claudia Navarro stood in front of Earth's military leaders and scientists, her expression hard and determined. The rejection by the Galactic Council had pushed Earth to the brink, but it also awakened something far more dangerous: humanity's hidden power. The moment the Council had chosen to silence Earth, they had made an irreversible mistake. Now, it was time for the galaxy to understand that humanity was not a species to be dismissed. For decades, Earth had secretly built up its military and technological capabilities, knowing that one day their place in the stars might be threatened. They had developed advanced spacefaring ships, weapons that could rival the greatest in the galaxy, and strategies that were as clever as they were brutal. But the true strength of Earth's military wasn't in its ships or its weapons. It was in the Ascendant Beacons, enormous planet-destroying devices that had been constructed in secret. These beacons were humanity's ultimate deterrent, designed not only to wipe out individual worlds, but to send a shockwave through entire star systems. The Council had no idea what they were dealing with when they dismissed Ambassador Lena Reyes. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. The Ascendant Beacons were distributed across different regions of space, hidden in remote sectors that no one would have ever thought to look. They were dormant, inactive, waiting for the day when Earth would need them. But with the Council's actions, that day had come sooner than expected. Earth's military commanders, under the direct orders of President Navarro, began to make preparations. They were not simply mobilizing their fleets, they were positioning the Ascendant Beacons in the most strategic locations, ready to activate them at a moment's notice. The message they were sending was clear: Earth had not been passive. They had been biding their time, waiting for the right moment, and now that moment had arrived. Earth's fleet, though small compared to the massive forces of the Galactic Council, had grown into a formidable force. The United Earth Fleet had been forged in the fires of countless skirmishes, training, and innovation. They were battle-hardened, relentless, and prepared for any scenario. But now, they were something more. Under the leadership of Admiral Samira Hale, the fleet began its operations. Each ship in the fleet had been specially designed with Earth's unique strengths in mind: agility, precision, and the ability to adapt quickly to ever-changing circumstances. Their weapon systems were cutting-edge, capable of taking down larger, more established fleets with surgical precision. But the real game-changer was the beacons. Once activated, they would make Earth's fleet unstoppable. As the first of the beacons powered up in a hidden sector of space, a message was broadcast across the galaxy. It was simple and direct, with no room for misunderstanding. Humanity is no longer an outsider. You have made your choice. We will make ours. The message was not a threat, it was a declaration. Earth had found its voice, and it would not be silenced. The galaxy's response was immediate. The Council, already on edge after the destruction of Ambassador Reyes, scrambled to gather intelligence. What were these beacons? How could a relatively young species like humanity possess such powerful weapons? They had underestimated humanity's potential, and now they were about to pay the price. But as the Council began to investigate, they found that the Ascendant beacons were not the only surprise Earth had hidden. Earth scientists had developed advanced cloaking technologies that allowed their ships and weapons to operate under the radar, unseen by even the most sophisticated scanners. Earth's ability to innovate quickly, often outpacing the galaxy's older civilizations, had caught the Council completely off guard. The next few days were filled with tension as Earth's fleet moved into position. With each passing hour, the Council grew more anxious. A sense of dread began to settle over the galaxy. For the first time, humanity was not acting from a place of desperation. They were not fighting to survive. They were fighting to ensure their place among the stars. And they were prepared to take whatever steps necessary to protect that future. The beacons, positioned across different regions, now pulsed with an energy that sent ripples through space itself. They were not just weapons. They were symbols of humanity's resolve, a warning to anyone who would dare threaten their future. Admiral Hale and her fleet knew that the Council would not sit idle for long. They would come for Earth, no doubt about it. But humanity's fleet was ready. In a series of coordinated strikes, the United Earth Fleet began to make its presence known. They attacked with speed, precision, and unrelenting focus on their objectives. Earth's ships were like shadows in the vast expanse of space, their attacks swift and deadly. They knew that the galaxy's older, more established civilizations would underestimate them, just as the Galactic Council had. But they were prepared for that. In the midst of these skirmishes, the Council was faced with a difficult decision. They had the power to retaliate, but they did not know the full extent of humanity's capabilities. Reports of the beacons began to spread, and with them came a sense of fear that rippled across the galaxy. The sheer magnitude of what Earth had developed was unlike anything the Council had ever encountered. Entire systems could be wiped out in an instant, and the Council's forces, despite their vast size and power, were not prepared for the kind of attack that Earth was capable of launching. It became clear to the leaders of the Council that they could not simply ignore Earth's demands anymore. They had miscalculated, and now they were trapped in a situation where any move they made could lead to the complete annihilation of entire worlds. The weight of the situation pressed down on the Council. They could no longer pretend that Earth was simply an insignificant, young species trying to make its way in the galaxy. Humanity had revealed its true power, and the galaxy was forced to take notice. For the first time in history, humanity stood at the center of the galaxy's attention, not as a weak outsider, but as a force to be reckoned with. And as the ascended beacons hummed with energy, the galaxy could no longer ignore the fact that Earth's might was no longer a secret. The Council had awoken something they could not control, and they were about to face the consequences. The Galactic Council was in chaos. What was once a symbol of unity and power across the universe was now a fractured, panicked organization, shaken to its very core. News of Earth's sudden rise in power, coupled with the terrifying presence of the ascendant beacons, had sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. The Council members, once confident in their ability to control the fate of the stars, now found themselves scrambling for a solution they could not easily find. For the first time in history, the galaxy's most powerful and ancient civilizations were faced with a threat they could not easily dismiss. The beacons, dormant and menacing, had been placed in strategic locations across the galaxy, their presence a constant reminder of the fury Earth could unleash at any moment. And the Council knew that any wrong move could mean the annihilation of entire star systems. In the Grand Council chambers, the leaders of the various species met in an emergency session, their faces drawn and weary. They had not expected this, no one had. The human species, once seen as unpredictable and unworthy of trust, had revealed its hidden strength. They had been underestimated, dismissed, and now they were in a position of power. The debate was fierce, with voices raised in panic and frustration. The Zorathians, once humanity's fiercest critics, argued that the only way to deal with Earth's new threat was to eliminate it completely. But the Orcs, ancient and wise, remained silent, their mysterious presence casting a shadow over the debate. Finally, it was Chorus, a Zorathian who had once been an ally of Earth, who spoke up. His voice was calm but filled with an undercurrent of fear. "We cannot destroy them, not without dire consequences," Chorus said, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "The beacons are not mere weapons, they are the embodiment of humanity's resolve. They will not back down, and we must understand that. We cannot simply attack them without considering the fallout." His words hung in the air, and for a moment, the council members fell silent. Chorus's warning was sobering. They had underestimated humanity's power. Earth was not a species that would crumble under pressure. It was a species that had fought, survived, and adapted for millennia, and now they were prepared to make their stand. The council had made its mistake, and now it had to figure out how to handle the situation without losing face and risking the destruction of countless lives. The debate raged on, with each species voicing its opinions, some demanding retaliation, others calling for negotiation. The Arvathi, a peaceful energy-based race, urged for diplomacy, suggesting that the Council offer Earth a place in the galactic community in exchange for their compliance. But the Orcs remained silent, their inscrutable eyes watching the proceedings with an almost eerie calm. They had been around for millennia, and they knew something the others did not. Humanity was a force that could not be ignored. The Arvathi's plea for peace seemed Navi in the face of what Earth had just demonstrated. While the Council deliberated, Earth's fleet continued to advance. The United Earth Fleet, under Admiral Samira Hale's command, had become a well-oiled machine. They were relentless in their operations, using their speed and precision to strike at targets across the galaxy with deadly accuracy. The beacons were now activated, their energy pulses sending ripples through space, and each pulse was a reminder that Earth was not just defending itself, it was preparing for something far greater. Earth had entered the galactic stage not as a supplicant, but as an equal, and every action they took made it clearer that they would not be subjugated. Their fleet was fast, their weapons advanced, and their resolve unshakable. But the Council's power was not easily dismantled. They were an alliance of civilizations that had existed for eons, each species boasting unique strengths and technologies. They had fought wars, brokered peace, and maintained order across the stars for centuries. The thought of being outmatched by a species as young and unpredictable as humanity was not only humiliating, it was terrifying. The Orcs, with their ancient knowledge and vast technological prowess, had warned the Council about underestimating humanity, but now they were left to deal with the consequences of their complacency. The Council leaders began to understand that diplomacy was no longer an option. Earth had burned that bridge the moment they activated the beacons. The galaxy's once unified front was now splintering, with various factions debating whether to make a stand against humanity or to try and broker some form of peace. But peace seemed impossible. How could any of them trust humanity after they had so openly declared their power? The fear of retaliation was palpable. If Earth decided to unleash the full might of its beacons, entire systems could be destroyed. The thought of facing that kind of power was enough to make even the most battle-hardened council members hesitate. In the midst of this chaos, Chorus reached out to President Claudia Navarro of Earth. He knew that the situation was dire, and he knew that diplomacy might be the only way to avoid a full-scale war. But he also knew that it would be a delicate balance. Earth's anger was understandable, but if the Council did not act quickly, the galaxy could spiral into a conflict that would destroy countless lives. President Navarro, however, was not interested in negotiations unless the Council was ready to offer something meaningful. She had seen the Council's true nature. They had dismissed humanity, believing it was weak. Now they were afraid. She would not be satisfied with empty promises. Earth had already given the Council a chance to join in peace, and they had chosen to ignore it. Now they would have to pay the price. "We didn't want war." Navarro's voice was firm as she spoke to Chorus through a secure channel. "But we will not be disrespected. You wanted to exclude us from the galaxy's future. Now, we will ensure that our place is not just given, it will be earned." As Navarro's words reached the Council, a cold realization settled over them. They had underestimated humanity, and now they would have to face the full weight of their mistake. The galaxy was not ready for the consequences of that miscalculation, and neither was the Council. Desperation was beginning to seep into their ranks as they scrambled to find a solution to a problem they had no idea how to fix. The fear of what Earth might do next hung over them like a dark cloud, and no one in the Council could say with certainty whether they would survive the storm that was coming. The question now was not whether Earth would retaliate, but when and how far humanity would go to secure its place in the galaxy. The Council had no answer, and that uncertainty made them more dangerous than they had ever been before. The decision had been made. The Galactic Council could no longer afford to wait. They could no longer let Earth dictate the terms of their future. The threat was too great, and the fear too consuming. Within days of President Navarro's bold statement, a coalition of Council forces, composed of the most powerful species in the galaxy, set their plans in motion. Earth's fleet, although powerful, could not match the sheer size of the combined military might the Council had assembled. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath as massive warships, each one a floating fortress, began to mobilize. Their target was clear Earth. Admiral Samira Hale knew that the Council would eventually come for Earth, but seeing the invasion fleet firsthand was something else. The sight of dozens of massive warships, their dark hulls looming ominously across the space lanes, sent a shiver through her spine. The United Earth Fleet had always prided itself on its speed and precision, but the numbers now before them were overwhelming. Yet there was no turning back. Earth's pride had been wounded, and humanity's response had been swift and decisive. The beacons, those planet-destroying weapons that had sparked fear in the hearts of the galaxy's oldest civilizations, pulsed quietly, waiting for their orders. Their activation was just a signal away. The first wave of the Council's fleet arrived at Earth's outer defense perimeter with a thunderous roar. Their weapons charged, engines burning bright as they approached with the kind of force that suggested an overwhelming attack was imminent. They were ready to annihilate, to erase humanity's defiance from the cosmos. The fleets of the Zorathians, the Thraxi, and several other key members of the Council formed an unbroken line, their massive warships drawing closer, each one a hulking giant of advanced technology. The hum of weapons charging echoed through the void as the fleet prepared for the final assault. All they needed now was for Earth to make the first move. But Earth didn't move. Not yet. Instead, Admiral Hale gave the order to fall back, her voice cold and calculated. "We are not going to fight them head-on. We'll make them regret thinking they can just walk all over us." The United Earth Fleet's ships, smaller but agile, moved swiftly into position, darting between asteroids and space debris, using the terrain to their advantage. Earth's fleet didn't have the firepower to compete with the Council's massive ships in a direct confrontation, but they had speed, and more importantly, they had the element of surprise. And then, without warning, the first wave of Earth's counterattack struck. It wasn't a broadside or a direct assault. Instead, it was a precise, targeted strike that ripped through the Council's front lines, catching them completely off guard. Earth's ships had cloaked themselves, blending into the darkness of space until the very last moment. It was a hit-and-run tactic, quick, deadly, and over before the enemy could react. The United Earth Fleet unleashed a flurry of precision missiles that pierced the hulls of the closest warships, sending them into disarray. It wasn't enough to win the battle, but it was enough to force the Council to halt their advance, momentarily stunned by the unexpected ferocity of Earth's response. The Council fleet was shaken, and for a brief moment, confusion spread like wildfire. Had they truly underestimated Earth to this extent? The Orcs, who had watched the battle from a distance, remained eerily silent, their ancient minds calculating the cost of this engagement. Chorus, the Zorathian who had once warned the Council of humanity's potential, could not help but feel the weight of his words. The humans were not to be taken lightly. But even with their immediate setback, the Council forces regained their composure, pushing forward once again. This time, however, something unexpected happened. An enormous burst of light erupted from the far side of the solar system. The beacons, all of them, were activating. The hum of their energy surged like a heartbeat, their power growing exponentially as they pulsed with the force of a dying star. The Council had no idea what was happening. Their ships hesitated, unable to predict how this new weapon would unfold. The first beacon, located just outside Earth's orbit, unleashed a shockwave that sent ripples through space itself. It wasn't just a weapon, it was an entire system of weapons, each one connected to the other, capable of creating an unimaginable force of destruction. The energy radiating from the beacon spread out in all directions, distorting the space around it, creating temporary rifts in the fabric of reality itself. The Council's fleet, already shaken from Earth's first surprise attack, could now feel the weight of the ascendant beacons bearing down on them. The space around them seemed to stretch and warp. Their advanced scanning systems began to fail, the once clear readings becoming corrupted as the beacon's energy disrupted their technology. The fleet's command structures began to crumble as chaos spread. The Orcs, typically unmoved by such things, now began to take notice, their advanced minds calculating the magnitude of the disaster unfolding before them. And then, just as the Council's forces were beginning to regroup, the unexpected happened. A massive communication burst came through, a message from Earth, one that no one saw coming. It wasn't a demand for surrender or an offer of peace, it was a declaration. "We are not your enemies," the voice of President Navarro echoed through the vastness of space, her words clear and cold. "We are not looking for war, but we will not stand by while you threaten our existence. If you want peace, you must come to us as equals. No more games. No more arrogance." Her voice was broadcast across every frequency, every ship in the Council fleet picking it up. The Council had expected Earth to bend, to retreat in fear. Instead, they were met with an unyielding strength. President Navarro's message was simple, and it had the intended effect: confusion. The Council's leaders, who had thought they were just moments away from wiping out humanity, were now left in a state of uncertainty. The beacons had changed everything. No longer were they fighting a desperate, weak species, they were fighting a force that could destroy entire systems with a thought. For the first time, the galaxy's most powerful civilizations were faced with an unexpected turn in the battle. Earth was not begging for survival, it was demanding respect. The Council's forces had been delayed, their confidence shaken. And now, as the tension in the galaxy reached its breaking point, the question remained: would the Council recognize Earth as an equal, or would their overconfidence lead to the downfall of their entire fleet? Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: humanity had shown that they would never be pushed aside again. The stars above Earth were no longer a silent backdrop to the chaos unfolding. They had become a stage for the greatest conflict the galaxy had ever known, one that was no longer about survival, but about asserting a place in the cosmos. The Galactic Council had miscalculated in ways they had never imagined. What had begun as a routine military operation to suppress Earth's defiance had spiraled into an all-out struggle for control and respect. The fleets of the Council had been pushed to the edge, their once imposing presence now uncertain as Earth's relentless fleet held its ground. The ascendant beacons hummed in the void, their energy a constant reminder of what could be unleashed at any moment. It was no longer just a matter of military power. It was about the reckoning for the arrogance of the galaxy's most established civilizations. The first moments of peace had come unexpectedly, when President Claudia Navarro's message cut through the noise of the battle. Her words were not an offer of compromise, but a challenge. "We will no longer be your pawns. We will not bend. We will not break. If you want to defeat us, you must come with everything you have. But know this, we will give you nothing less than what we deserve." The Council was stunned. They had assumed Earth's strength was only in its weapons, in its tactical brilliance, but they had underestimated humanity's spirit. The beacon's pulses resonated across the galaxy, causing chaos in the heart of the Council's fleet. The once unified military might of the Council faltered as their strategic networks, their communications, and their technology began to fail under the overwhelming energy emitted by Earth's newly activated weapons. The warships that had once towered over Earth's smaller, more agile fleet were now crippled, their systems malfunctioning in the wake of the beacon's destructive pulses. The fear that had once been relegated to a whisper throughout the Council now spread like wildfire. Earth had done the unthinkable. They had shifted the balance of power in the galaxy. But the Council was not about to admit defeat. Their pride, their centuries of dominance, and their vast fleets still made them formidable. The leaders of the Council convened once more, their faces grim, their minds racing. They could not afford to lose. To do so would mean the end of their status, the fall of their legacy. Yet, as their ships regained power and their weapons began to recharge, a new realization set in. This was not just about military might anymore. Earth had shown them something the Council had never seen before, something raw, powerful, and terrifying. Earth had shown them what it meant to fight for more than just survival. They had shown the Council what it meant to fight for a future. Admiral Samira Hale knew what had to come next. This was not a war she wanted to win through sheer destruction, not when humanity's very existence hung in the balance. She had seen the tides of war turn before, and now, for the first time, she saw a different path forward. A path that could lead to peace, but only if the Council was willing to listen. She understood the stakes. The Council would not back down easily. But she also understood that Earth had the power to change the course of history. For the first time in generations, the galaxy had to reckon with the fact that they could no longer treat humanity as a weak species. As the Council regrouped and the fleets prepared for another confrontation, something unexpected happened. A wave of peace emissaries, sent by various alien races who had witnessed the battle and feared the consequences of an all-out war, began to arrive. The Orcs, long silent throughout the conflict, sent their own representative, a being older than the stars themselves, whose words carried the weight of millennia. Their message was clear. The galaxy's peace is no longer a singular endeavor. It is a collective one. Humanity must be a part of it, not as an outsider, but as an equal. The message struck like a thunderclap in the middle of the chaos. The Orcs, the oldest and most respected species in the galaxy, had spoken. Earth was no longer the rebellious newcomer, it was now a power that had earned its place. And the Orcs' support changed everything. The Council's decision-making faltered once again. How could they continue to fight a war against Earth, when the most ancient and wise species in the galaxy had made it clear that humanity was no longer to be ignored? Chorus, the Zerathian who had tried to warn the Council, stood in the chambers, his eyes full of regret. "We were wrong," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of his realization. "This is not a fight we can win. Not anymore." President Navarro, standing in her command center on Earth, had no illusions about what had transpired. She knew that Earth had now become the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. But she also knew that the battle for respect had been won. No one would dismiss humanity again. The Galactic Council, for all their pride and power, had been forced to accept that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. And in that moment, Earth had become a beacon, a symbol of what happens when a species fights not just for survival, but for their right to exist, to thrive, and to shape the future. As the Council ships, now crippled and desperate, slowed their advance, a ceasefire was called. The beacons dimmed their pulses, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, space was silent. It was not an end, but a beginning, a new dawn for the galaxy. Earth had earned its place, not just as a member of the galactic community, but as an equal to the greatest civilizations the stars had ever known. In the days that followed, the representatives of the Galactic Council came to Earth not as conquerors, but as partners. They came not with weapons or threats, but with the hope of rebuilding. The peace talks were long and complicated, but for the first time, Earth sat at the table, not as an outsider, but as an equal, ready to shape the future of the stars. Humanity had changed the course of history, not with their weapons, but with their unwavering resolve. And the galaxy, once divided, began to see a new light on the horizon, one where Earth was no longer just a small, insignificant planet on the edge of the stars, but a shining beacon of what could be achieved when the oppressed rise up, not with hatred, but with a vision for a better future. The reckoning had come, and with it, a new dawn. The galaxy would never be the same again.